All right, let's kick things off with a really challenging idea, one that comes from Peter Thiel's incredible book, Zero to One. Now, we're all taught that competition is the heart of capitalism, right? That it's healthy, it's necessary, it's what drives us forward. But what if that's just plain wrong? What if all that conventional wisdom is actually leading businesses down a path to nowhere? And that leads us to this huge, provocative question. What if the whole point of business isn't to outmuscle your rivals in some bloody fight, but to create something so new, so unique, that you don't even have any rivals to begin with? I mean, that's a total shift in how you think, and it completely changes the game. And man, when you put them side by side, the difference is just night and day. On one side, you've got competition. It's this brutal, day-to-day fight for survival. You've got razor-thin margins, low pay. You basically have to be ruthless just to stay afloat. But on the other side, a monopoly. And that means freedom. The freedom to actually think long-term, the profits to invest in huge ideas, and even the space to care about things like ethics, not just the bottom line. It's a massive difference. So first, let's just tear down this myth that competition is always a good thing. Thiel argues that what we call healthy competition is a lot of the time just a destructive race to the bottom for everyone involved. I want you to picture a small restaurant in a super busy city. It's the classic example of a competitive business. The margins are so incredibly tight that they can pretty much only pay minimum wage. They have to squeeze every single penny of efficiency out of everything they do. And that intense pressure, it drives people to the edge. The source even brings up these heartbreaking stories of Michelin-starred chefs who were driven to despair over the fear of losing just one star. That is not a healthy system. It's a war where nobody really wins. And this really hits on a huge difference in how these companies have to think. When you're stuck in that fierce competition, money isn't just important, it is everything. Like Thiel says here, monopolists can afford to think about things other than making money, non-monopolists can't. It's so true. You can't be thinking about your 10-year vision or your company's ethics when you're just trying to figure out how to make payroll next week. Escaping that battle, that's what gives a company the freedom to actually think bigger. Okay, I know what you're thinking. The word monopoly has some serious negative baggage, right? You're probably picturing some cartoon villain with a top hat jacking up prices on everyone. But we have to redefine that term, get the board game out of our heads. So this is where we have to make a really important distinction. You've got the rent collector monopoly, which is the bad kind. That's the one that corners a market that already exists and just jacks up the prices. But then you have the creative monopoly. This is a company that creates something so new and so much better that it actually gives customers more choice, not less, because it opens up whole new worlds of possibility. Think about it. The iPhone didn't just take over the phone market, it created the smartphone market as we know it. So this is the idea we're really talking about. A creative monopoly is a business that is just so good at what it does, so unique that nobody else can even offer a close substitute. And it's not about crushing innovation, it's the result of innovation. And those lasting profits, that's the reward for bringing something truly new and valuable into the world. So if building a creative monopoly is the goal, what's the biggest thing that gets in the way? Well, a lot of the time, it's just plain old rivalry, this destructive force that can turn business into something like a Shakespearean tragedy. You gotta ask, why do businesses even fight in the first place? Karl Marx had one idea. He thought people fight because they're totally different, like the workers versus the owners. But Shakespeare, he gives us a much better model for business. People fight because they're actually the same. Think about Romeo and Juliet, right? Two families, both alike in dignity. They get so obsessed with beating each other that they completely lose sight of what actually matters. And you don't have to look far for a perfect example of this in action. Just look at the war between Microsoft and Google. They started out in completely different universes. Microsoft owned operating systems, Google owned search. But then they became absolutely obsessed with each other. They started launching all these copycat products, like Bing versus Google Search, Office versus Docs. And while they were busy fighting this pointless war of imitation, what happened? Apple, who was totally laser-focused on its own unique thing, just blew right past both of them. That rivalry cost them everything. I mean, this kind of obsession can get almost ridiculous. After Square came out with its iconic, square-shaped mobile payment reader, what did its competitors do? They just started making different shapes. There was a half moon, a cylinder, a triangle. This isn't innovation, it's just silly. It's focusing on what your competitor looks like instead of creating any real value for your customers. All right, so we've established competition is a trap, rivalry is a disaster. How in the world do you actually build one of these creative monopolies? Well, let's get into the blueprint. So, every monopoly is going to be unique, but they tend to share some combination of these four key things. First, you've got proprietary technology, stuff that's really hard to copy. Second, network effects, which is just a fancy way of saying the product gets better as more people use it, like Facebook. Third is economies of scale, meaning the bigger you get, the cheaper it is to make your product. And last but not least, a super powerful brand. Now, when we talk about that proprietary tech, just being a little bit better isn't going to cut it. To really truly escape competition, your solution needs to be at least 10 times better than whatever the next best thing is. That 10x improvement, that creates a gap so big that no one can argue with it. Okay, and this next part is maybe the most counterintuitive piece of the whole puzzle. You don't go after some huge billion-dollar market on day one. No. The smart move is to start with a tiny, super specific market that you can completely, utterly dominate. Don't believe me? Just look at the playbook for some of the biggest companies out there. Amazon didn't start trying to be the everything store. Nope, it started by cornering the market on online books. Facebook, it was just for Harvard students at first. And eBay's first big market, you're not going to believe it, obsessive Beanie Baby collectors. They each became the king of a tiny little pond first and then expanded out from there. And this all leads to a final, really critical way to think about the goal. It's not about being the first mover. That's a myth. It's about being the last mover, the one who makes the final great development in a market and then gets to enjoy the profits from that for decades. This brings up a super important point about how we measure value. A company isn't just worth what it's making today, it's worth all the money it's expected to make in the future. Check this out. Back in 2013, the New York Times, which was profitable, was valued at less than $2 billion. But Twitter, which was actively losing money, was valued at $24 billion. Why? Because investors believed Twitter was on its way to building a monopoly that would gush cash for years and years to come. So picture the money a normal competitive business makes, like that restaurant we talked about. It might be doing okay today, but everyone expects that value to just get competed away over time, slowly fading, as rivals chip away at its profits. A creative monopoly, though? Totally different story. Companies like, say, LinkedIn often lose money for years while they're building their advantage. The huge majority of their value isn't what they're making today, it's in the massive profits they expect to make 10, 15, even 20 years from now. These companies are built to last. And this amazing twist on Tolstoy's famous line just wraps it all up perfectly. All happy companies are different. Each one earns a monopoly by solving a unique problem. All failed companies are the same. They failed to escape competition. In the end, success is all about creating something that's one of a kind. Failure is almost always the same old story, getting trapped in a fight you just can't win. So I guess the question to leave you with is this. Are you building a business to compete, or are you building one to last?